Miguel Dorati and Devin Miller back here on the CRP, and that means more MMA talk. We are on the verge of the UFC returning from London to the United States for a big card labeled UFC Fight Night 148 out of Nashville, Tennessee. The main event sees Stephen Thompson facing Anthony Pettis. And we are going to talk about the prospect watch, or a prospect of the week, on this card. Devin Miller, we're going to talk about female flyweight Maycee Barber. Barber 6-0, 20 years old, and they call her the future. Give us a little more.
Well, yeah, you just brought up some of the most important aspects of this girl. When you look at the very first thing that stands out when you look at her is that she's 20 years old. This girl was born in 1998, and I would encourage anybody that has a Fight Pass subscription or has any way of looking up her fights that she had on the Contender series and her UFC debut, and just checking her out, you'll understand why we're picking her as the prospect of the week. If somebody has seen those fights, they wouldn't even question why there is such hype on this girl, because she's very vicious. She's clearly very talented, and in her last fight, she actually weighed in heavy down at women's strawweight, and she's going up for this fight to women's flyweight, which I think is a good move, because this is a wide open division that's currently has Valentina Shevchenko as their champion, but there's really no clear. It hasn't been around long enough to really understand, to really see where the rankings really should be. So it's kind of wide open, and there's no potential big star that seems like it's going to be coming out of this division anytime soon, except for maybe Maycee Barber. And she came out in November, and there was an article on ESPN.com by Brett Okamoto right before her debut about, it was headlined UFC debutante Maycee Barber 20 plans a record climb to the top. So she was talking about this legendary run that she's about to go on before her debut. She did not disappoint in her debut, just viciously dominated Hannah Cyphers in her octagon debut. And since then, she came out, and there was another article not long ago, I think just last month in February or late January, and it was making the rounds, and there was a lot of people that were laughing about it on Facebook because they don't know who she is, where she made a commentary of Wani that she'll be as big, if not bigger, than Conor McGregor and Ronda Rousey. And she vowed that to Dana White, that she's going to be this huge star. She wants to be the youngest champion in UFC history. She wants to break John Jones's record. And all of this would sound kind of, a little much, a little shooting the bar a little too high. But when you watch her fight, she's one of those girls that you're like, wow, she's 20. Like, she's very, very impressive. So I would actually have to say that out of all the women on the roster right now, she's actually who I'm most excited to see compete again, just because she had looked like she has the potential to be somebody like a transcendent star that we haven't seen yet before.
Well, what she's facing this weekend, she's got JJ Aldrich, 7-2 overall, so more experience, a little older obviously, and a girl who also she dropped her UFC debut, but she's bounced back to win 3 in a row, and every one of those has gone the distance. So this girl has logged some ring time and is now getting close to an hour of time in the UFC. That means something. And, pulling out the wins with the judges, of course, means something. So 3-1, how does she stack up with Barber? What do you see happening here?
I think this is definitely a step up in competition for Barber at this point, who came out of the LFA, and nothing against Hannah Cyphers, but JJ Aldrich is a better fighter than her. And like, as you mentioned, has more of a resume inside the UFC. But I do like that they are giving her somebody that's actually got some wins under her belt, because I think Maycee's going to want to kind of streamline into at least having a number next to her name on the rankings. And there is always the fear that you put a lot of hype on these people, especially somebody as young as 20 years old. They start drinking their own Kool-Aid. they start thinking that they're better than they're more advanced than what they are. They get pushed too fast, and then they get humbled. We've seen that with Sage Northcutt. We've seen that with other people in the past. I'm not so sure it's going to happen. Yeah, Sergio Pettis was another one. I'm not so sure that that's going to happen here. And we've seen that. Well, we also, just going back to that, we also seen it recently in Bellator with Aaron Pico, who is clearly, like you've seen a couple of his performances, brutal, nice knockouts where, and you find out his background of being of high level boxing training, a great wrestler. And, you know, you look at him and you feel like there's an aura about him that, oh, he's going to be a big star. But then when you see him get in there, he is still a little green. He gets in there with a good competitor, and he's been knocked out a couple times now. Well, he got submitted once and then knocked out in his last fight. So that happens. I think if the people around her are smart, they're probably cautioning her against that. But she definitely, clearly, either has kind of drank her own Kool-Aid, or she truly does believe in herself that much and has had it tested in the gym how good she is, and truly believes that she's going to be something special, because she's coming out, and like I said, she's setting the bar high. She's putting a lot of added pressure on herself that if she didn't think she could back it up, if she didn't genuinely think she could back it up, would be pretty silly. So, and so far from what I've seen in her, she's backed up every word. So I'm really excited to see this fight this weekend.
And we are looking at the UFC in Tennessee this weekend, Saturday, March 23rd. And the prospect of the week comes to us in the women's flyweight division as Maycee Barber takes on JJ Aldrich. I've been joined by our MMA analyst, Devin Miller, to talk about Maycee, the future Barber.